Rookie cop arrests ordinary man, then learns he's the police chief's son. It was a crisp autumn evening in the bustling city of Crestwood, where the streets were alive with the hum of traffic and the glow of neon signs, the person said. An officer named Jake Carter, who was just starting out in the police force and had a badge that was so shiny that it still had the store's shine on it, was patrolling his typical route. In spite of the fact that he had only been on the police for 3 months, he was very keen to demonstrate his worth. Jake was the sort of law enforcement officer that adhered to the whole rule book, including every single line, word, and comma. His understanding of the law was that it was either black or white, and there was no opportunity for ambiguity. That evening, Jake's radio began to make a crackling sound. Please be on the lookout for a silver car that was involved in a hit-and-run accident at the intersection of 5th and Maple. The suspect is a male, possibly in his mid-30s, and he is wearing a dark hoodie. Jake's heart broke. It was his opportunity to make a significant impact on the world. He activated his siren and raced toward the location of the incident. While he was making the left into Maple Street, his keen eyes got a sight of a silver automobile that was parked in an alleyway in a disorganized manner. A guy wears a black hoodie and is seen leaning against the automobile while fumbling with something in his hands. The door on the driver's side of the vehicle was slightly ajar. Jake's training began to take effect. He moved closer with caution, his hand resting on the butt of his revolver as he neared. Jake issued the directive with a voice that was calm but authoritative. "Sir, please step away from the vehicle and keep your hands where I can see them," Jake said. The hood cast a shadow over the man's face as he deliberately turned slowly. "Whoa, officer, take a chance." It was a nonchalant and almost dismissive tone that he used when he remarked, "I'm just getting some air." Immediately, Jake's gut told him that something was not quite right. When compared to someone who had just departed the site of an accident, the man's manner was excessively calm and confident. Jake's eyebrows narrowed as he said, "Please provide me with a license and registration." The individual let out a sigh and reached inside his pocket. Jake braced himself, braced to face anything. The guy, however, did not bring out a weapon, but rather a crumpled license, and handed it over to the other person. It was Ethan Daniels, 34 years old, and Jake gave it a quick perusal. There was something about the man's arrogant smile that made Jake's stomach turn, even if the name did not strike any bells. It was Jake who issued the command, "Mr. Daniels, please exit the vehicle. You are being detained on suspicion of involvement in a hit-and-run accident," the officer said. The eyebrow of Ethan was lifted, and he had a smile playing over his lips. "As a greenhorn, you are making a significant error." Jake chose to disregard the remark and instead placed Ethan in handcuffs and read him his rights. While Ethan was escorting him to the police vehicle, he smirked to himself under his breath. "Kid, you're going to come to regret this." When Jake returned to the station, he processed Ethan with the utmost attention to detail. To ensure that he had a strong case, he completed the necessary documentation, cataloged the evidence, and even double-checked the surveillance tape from the location where the incident occurred. It was a source of pride for him, the sort of arrest that may bring him a commendation, and perhaps even a promotion, was the kind that he had just committed. On the other hand, the older man's face became pale as he handed the paperwork to his sergeant. "Does Jake have any idea who this person is?" When the sergeant posed the question, his voice was shaking. Jake wore a frown. It was Ethan Daniels. "As far as I can tell, he is simply a man who believes he is above the law." With a solemn look on his face, the sergeant shrugged his head. "No, Jake," she said. "He is not simply a random person. He is Chief Daniels' son." Jake's blood became ice cold. While serving as the head of the Crestwood Police Department, Chief Daniels was a guy who was well known for his unwavering commitment to discipline and his no-nonsense approach. The police force regarded him as a legend and a policeman's officer. However, Jake had just taken his kid into custody. In the morning of the next day, Jake was called to the office of the chief. As he made his way down the lengthy corridor, his stomach was in knots, and the sound of his footfall reverberated much like a death march. A booming voice shouted, "Enter." He pounded on the door, and the voice said, "Enter." The icy glare of Chief Daniels was fixated on Jake as he sat still behind his desk. The only sound that could be heard was the ticking of a clock that was mounted on the wall. While Jake stood at attention, his heart was beating rapidly. With a controlled tone and a quiet voice, the chief introduced himself as Officer Carter. "Are you aware of the reason you are here?" Jake responded, "Yes, sir," in a voice that was scarcely audible above a whisper. "Last night, I placed your son under arrest." With his back arched and his countenance inscrutable, the chief sat back in his chair. "Also, do you really regret it?" Jake shook his head. He reflected on the arrogant expression on Ethan's face, the victim of the hit-and-run accident who was laying wounded on the street, and the law that he had vowed to preserve. "No, sir," he said resolutely. "I was on the job at the time." There was a brief gap of silence in the room. Jake was taken aback when the chief smiled at him at that moment. "Officer Carter, you really did a good job. Even though he is a member of my family, my kid is not above the law. You have made the correct decision." Jake blinked, unable to believe his eyes. "You are really kind, sir." The chief rose up and extended his hand to the man. "You have a lot of courage, youngster, as well as honesty. What this department needs is just that." Continue to do a wonderful job. Jake was overcome with a sense of pride as he was leaving the workplace. In spite of the fact that it seemed as if the whole world was against him, he had confronted his concerns and remained true to his ideals. In that same instant, he realized that he was no longer only a rookie police officer. Rather, he was a genuine law enforcement official. But the tale did not come to an end there. Ethan Daniels made the decision to make a change in his life after being humbled by his incarceration and the undying support that his father had for Jake. At the site of the hit-and-run accident, he gave his time to assist the victim in recovering from their injuries and even paid for their medical expenses. Is that Jake? He rose to prominence within the Crestwood Police Department, being well known not just for his strict adherence to the rules, but also for his bravery and unyielding commitment to justice. The news of Jake's courageous arrest and Chief Daniels' unexpected response spread like wildfire across the Crestwood Police Department. At one point in time, officers who had previously seen Jake as nothing more than a green rookie looked at him with a fresh respect. There were even headlines like, "Rookie Cop Stands Firm. Justice Knows No Favorites," emblazoned across the main page of the local newspaper once the tale found its way to the local news organization. A few days ago, Jake was the topic of conversation in the town. However, Jake was not the kind of person to take pleasure in being the center of attention. He went back to his beat with the intention of demonstrating that his acts were not only an isolated instance of courage, but rather a character trait that reflected who he was as a law enforcement officer. While all was going on, Ethan Daniels, who had been released on bond, was dealing with the repercussions of his conduct. A woman called Maria Lopez, who was a single mother, was the victim of a hit-and-run accident. She had suffered a fractured leg and had been unable to work for many weeks, while his father was keeping a close check on him. Ethan went to see her in the hospital to personally apologize for what had happened. During the time when Ethan was standing beside Maria's hospital bed, he spoke with a shaky voice and said, "I do not expect you to forgive me, but I want to put everything in their proper place. Every single one of your medical expenses will be paid for, and I will do all in my power to assist you and your family. Maria has accepted his apologies, despite her initial skepticism. During the following several weeks, Ethan remained true to his pledge. Not only did he pay for her medical expenditures, but he also made arrangements for her to undergo physical therapy and even assisted her in finding a part-time work that was suitable for her disability. There were very few people who had ever seen this side of Ethan. It was a guy who was humiliated and determined to improve. When Jake was nearing the end of his shift one evening, Chief Daniels approached him in the parking lot of the precinct. A solemn but not cruel look could be seen on the chief's face. The chief addressed Carter and stated, "I've been keeping an eye on you. The fact that you have potential does not mean anything if you do not work to develop it. If I were to set up a special task force, would you be interested in participating in it? Cleaning up the most troublesome areas in the city is the primary emphasis of this initiative." Jake's eyes became more wide. It was the type of opportunity that he had always hoped for, a chance to make a significant difference in the world. The response he gave was, "I'd be honored, sir," the chief indicated with a nod. "That's good. There is, however, a catch. My son, Ethan, will be working with you in this endeavor." Jake's stomach sank to the floor. "Is that Ethan? With all due respect, I'm not sure that's a smart idea, the honorable gentleman." One of the chiefs raised his hand. "I get what you mean. However, Ethan is making an effort to rectify his life, and I believe that working with someone like you, someone who does not take shortcuts, could be just what he needs in order to achieve his goals. Plus, the two of you have a history together. Could it be that it's time to rewrite it?" Jake reluctantly gave his consent. Within a week, he discovered that he was assigned to work with Ethan on the task force. Initially, the tension that existed between them was quite noticeable. Jake was unsure whether or not he could put his faith in Ethan, since he was still getting used to his new job. However, when they worked together to carry out tasks like his patrolling high-crime areas, speaking with community leaders, and even breaking a tiny drug ring, they started to acquire a mutual respect for one another. In the middle of the night, when Ethan was searching for a possible gang hideaway, he finally broke the stillness. "Listen, Carter, I am quite aware that I was a jerk when we first met. However, I want you to know that I am working hard to improve myself. Due to the fact that my father has always been a larger-than-life character, I suppose I have spent the most of my life attempting to live up to his expectations. However, I am not him. I am simply me." Jake gave him a quick look, taken aback by the vulnerability that was there in his voice. "Everyone here is simply trying to find out what's going on, Ethan. Whatever you choose to do with the second opportunity that has been handed to you is what really counts." Over the course of the subsequent several months, Jake and Ethan developed into an improbable but successful combination. Their cooperation became to represent something more significant for the city of Crestwood, which was a bridge between the old guard and the new guard, as well as between responsibility and redemption. A discernible decrease in criminal activity was the result of the work of the task force, and the community started to trust the police in ways that they had not done so in the past. On a certain occasion, Jake and Ethan were standing on a rooftop that overlooked Crestwood as the sun was setting over the community. The streets below were filled with the sounds of music and laughing, which was a striking contrast to the anxiety and terror that had previously dominated the neighborhood. "I used to despise this city," Ethan blurted out, shattering the hush that had been surrounding them. "I was under the impression that it was only a location where individuals like my father could act out the role of a hero. Now, however, I am not sure.